Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. In a world which is then constantly striving towards a greater equality and of course inclusivity, what is very important to then of course shed light upon is the growing marginalization of differently abled persons in Pakistan. In this regard, it's very pertinent to mention that globally over 1 billion people experience some form of a disability, and in Pakistan alone, millions face daily challenges when it comes to accessing their basic rights, be it rights related to healthcare, be it rights related to education, or for that matter even rights related to their employment per se. To what extent do we see Pakistani laws and policies actually protecting and empowering differently abled persons in Pakistan? This is something upon which we'll be shedding light today. Overall, we'll not only be talking about this from a legalistic viewpoint, but we'll also be shedding light upon this from a social perspective too. In this regard particularly, we'll be talking about not one, rather quite a few challenges that differently abled persons in Pakistan actually face, whether those challenges then emanate from their lack of access to public spaces, whether those challenges then emanate from a lack of implementation of laws and policies which actually protect them, or whether those challenges then emanate from the typical societal mindsets that we still unfortunately still do come across in the Pakistani society, those which then categorize such people to be objects of charity as opposed to perhaps being empowered individuals in their own rights. This is something upon which we'll be shedding light today. Overall, in this regard, we'll not only be talking about the pivotal role of technology when it comes to ensuring their greater inclusion, but also the very important initiatives taken by the Pakistani government when it comes to overall empowering and uplifting differently abled persons in the Pakistani society. All of this today, that too with an extremely eminent panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for today's show is Ms. Nabila Chaudhary. She is a psychologist. Also, she is an expert on disability rights. Assalamu alaikum, madam, and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Alongside her, I have Muhammad Ali. He is a disability rights activist. He is also an educationist. Assalamu alaikum ji, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And my third panelist for today's show is Ms. Sana Khurshid. She is also a lawyer alongside being a disability rights advocate. Assalamu alaikum ji, and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Now, before we start the discussion on today's topic, let's have a look at this brief report.
Pakistan is making significant strides towards building an inclusive society for persons with disabilities. With the passage of progressive laws like the Disabled Persons Employment and Rehabilitation Ordinance and the establishment of various welfare programs, the government is committed to ensuring equal opportunities for all. Public awareness campaigns are shedding light on the need for accessibility and inclusion in education, employment, and public spaces. Numerous organizations are actively working to empower PWDs, offering skills, training, and employment initiatives. Moreover, inspiring individuals with disabilities are breaking barriers, excelling in diverse fields such as education, sports, and entrepreneurship, proving that with the right support, they can thrive and contribute to the nation's growth. Together, we are moving towards a future where every person, regardless of ability, is valued and included in Pakistan's progress.
Welcome back from the report. Now, to get the conversation started with you, madam, when we do talk about differently abled persons, I think the first thing that we must talk about is the fact there's definitely a dire need to work towards early diagnosis and timely intervention. Now, despite the fact that according to the findings of one report, which very clearly states that Pakistan happens to have one of the highest reported rates of childhood intellectual disabilities in the world, why then is there so much gap? Why then is there so much delay when it comes to identifying such disabilities per se?
Well, there are different dimensions to this question.
Right.
Firstly, the international statistics are much higher than what we are calculating here in Pakistan. Because according to the census of 2017, there is less than 1% disability ratio in Pakistan.
Right.
That is definitely not in line with the international
findings. And according
findings.
to UNDP, stats suggest that nearly 6.2% of the Pakistani population has some form of a disability. And then again, if you study the HRW, that is the Human Rights Watch stats, they very clearly indicate that this figure might be somewhere between 3.3 million to 27 million. So there again, there's a lot of discrepancy.
Exactly. And even, you know, there is a mix, that is multiple indicator cluster survey that is conducted by the statistics of Bureau of Statistics Punjab, and it says that there is more than 17% disability in children aged 5 to 17. There is a huge difference in the statistics.
There is no consistency. So do you feel then that this is that one reason which actually leads to people not being able to timely identify? Because of course, if you don't have the correct statistics in place, how can you go about actually defining disability so as to timely diagnose it?
I think actually the timely assessment or screening is the reason that we are not getting the right statistics.
Okay.
Because the early screening should be done at the time of birth or around the time of birth, and then in early infancy. The hospitals are not equipped with the required manpower and the required assessment tools. That's why the children are not screened and they are not identified earlier. Like if a child is having a hearing problem, he should be actually screened at the time of birth and during infancy multiple times, because there are international medical rules that require different type of screening.
And not only international medical rules, but also in this regard, we've had a very progressive law in Punjab around 2 years ago, the Punjab Disabilities Empowerment Act, which actually calls for having prenatal screenings. Sana, would you want to add something to that? Because I do know that you have had a lot of influence in actually getting this law passed.
See, when we were getting this law passed and when we were making it actually, so we had a lot of objectives in mind, and one of the main things was that we want to identify disabilities at the earliest level possible. So that's when the prenatal screenings came in. Because there are a lot of disabilities, if caught early on, if treated early on, could, you know, it could stop their progression.
Right.
And she just talked about hearing impairment. So if like a little child gets a hearing aid at a very young level, so maybe his, you know, the disability does not progress.
Right.
So we were very clear on that fact that we want to have prenatal screening for disabilities.
Right.
It is very, very necessary, so that to equip the young parents as well, that they should also know what, and to give them the sort of support that they'll eventually need.
And also to mentally prepare them that way, because a lot of times we see that, you know, when the child is born, slowly and steadily that diagnosis is made. But if, you know, God forbid this happens to anybody's child, they would be prepared before time that way too. Ali, coming towards you, when we do talk about your line of work, what we do understand and of course appreciate about your work is the fact that you've been very actively advocating to work towards inclusion of special children, that too in mainstream schools. Whereas of course we do understand that yes, this is something which is globally acknowledged, appreciated, and it is definitely the way forward when it comes to ensuring persons with disabilities inclusion in the schooling system. Do you not feel that at least in the short term it would also place some kind of a burden on the educational institutions?
I think when we talk about burden, I don't think that's the case, because I studied in a normal school, and I personally think that when we discuss normal schools, kids learn to adapt really fast. And when they learn to adapt, then only you can do away with discriminatory narratives that are attached to them. For example, if somebody calls you a blind person and like believes that you cannot do anything, if you are in the same class with individuals that can see and you get a position in the class, you are able to actually break away from those particular narratives, and this is how mindsets change. Wherever there has been affirmative action, in my opinion, countless examples from history, discrimination has always increased. Wherever there has been absolute equality, for example, the apartheid movement in terms of racial discrimination in South Africa, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, wherever in the world you've seen all of this, assimilation is the only way which is sustainable for any group that is out there.
Right. But then again, I feel that this is something which must come with the right enabling system in place. We need to have our resources in place. We need to have the proper teachers in place who are actually equipped so as to deal with students who might just have very severe disabilities. And this is something on which you would be able to comment as well, because generally we have seen that yes, this is the way forward and this is the way ideally things should be. But then again, we've also come across concerns being raised by parents where perhaps they might not be very comfortable sending their children to school, especially knowing that those schools might also accommodate persons with different abilities too. So this is something which comes with its socio-cultural nuances too.
True, very true. But I would say there is a slogan associated with inclusion, that is, the children who learn together learn to live together. So in principle, there is no argument that we should have inclusive education.
Of course,
obviously,
in principle.
In principle. But then we have to, address the social realities and the financial resources and the human resources that we have available in current educational setups.
Right.
So basically, there are certain disabilities for whom it is not, much resources are not required. Like if there's a child who's on wheelchair, but otherwise he does not have any problems. You just have to make the school accessible, you have to make the washrooms accessible, and you have to create the right social environment.
Right.
Then there are children who are with Down syndrome or intellectual impairment or autism. Right now, our schools are not equipped and not ready. They require more resources, and they require more training of the staff and the management.
Right, basically. So teacher training itself, that becomes extremely important. We'll talk about this, but before that, Sana, I would want you to comment on this further. So overall, when we do talk about not one, rather quite a few challenges that differently abled persons in Pakistan face, here it's very important that we do look at this issue from a gender specific lens. Now we do understand the fact that when it comes to female differently abled persons, unfortunately they do face double discrimination. One which then stems from their gender per se, the other which then of course is related with the disability too. So as a female who is differently abled, how would you comment on this, and do you not feel that in light of such double discrimination they perhaps might need double protection too?
Like you just said, in a society as a woman you're already at a disadvantage, and throw in a disability, so you are doubly disadvantaged. But yes, for me personally, gave me the passion, it ignited that passion inside me that I need to prove a lot of people wrong. I need to, but it's exhausting as women generally, that we have to work double to just prove that we are not less than anybody, but that should not be the argument.
Of course.
There's nobody's better or less, we're just all equal. And when we talk about like a truly inclusive society, that's what we talk about, that everybody gets the same opportunities and the same benefits or rights as just anybody else, irrespective of their gender, of their background, of their ability or disability, etc., etc. So that should not, at this stage in time, this should not be an discussion.
Ideally, it should not be in a discussion, but unfortunately, at least I feel, and you may beg to differ, that when it comes to our policies, women do need that extra element of protection that way as well.
And let me tell you another thing as well. When I started my accessibility journey, we were dismissed for being young as well. We were told that we are impractical for asking for a ramp. We were told we didn't know what we were talking about. You're being unrealistic, you're being childish. And what was our demand? A ramp and a washroom, a disabled washroom. So yes, in our country you are dismissed for being a woman, for being disabled, and sometimes for being young as well.
And this is something which then transcends onto their marriage proposals too. A lot of times we see women who might be differently abled, they might not end up getting proposals, and that might not be the case when it comes to their male counterparts. Ali, I would want you to add to this, since you are the only male on the panel here today. So when it comes to overall comparing and contrasting both your educational as well as your employment experiences here, as well as those that you did have abroad, because I do understand that you studied at the NYU, how would you make that comparison when it comes to not only having the right infrastructure in place, when it comes to accessing public spaces, but also for that matter having perhaps a more supportive environment, so to speak?
But I can just give you a little insight, because both me and my sister were visually impaired, and both of us studied here and abroad as well. I think that primarily it does help if you are a male, because obviously you can actually ask for help easily. So one example, if we travel abroad, I can ask other passengers to hold my hand, take me to the airplane, or to be do sighted guide, all of those things with me. But it's like obviously way harder for my sister to do so. So I think on a comparative, yes, it does make things extremely hard, and I cannot take that place of their gender, because I obviously cannot understand the suffering or the discrimination that is attached to having that double burden on placed on self.
Right, Ali. But then you see, moving past this debate, when we do make that comparative analysis of education systems in Pakistan to what they are abroad, be it in the US, be it in the UK, since you've had that benefit of studying in both the countries, how would you make that evaluation to be when it comes to not only having the right assistive technologies in place, but also perhaps having better equipped teachers to teach you? Because then again, that is a very important part of the entire educational experience.
Basically, I think a lot of things are a given over there. They have ratified the UNCRPD. America has the American Disability Act, the ADA. Nobody can go against it. So like if you ask the university to do a certain thing for you, they will do it. The problem here, I think, is that there are certain policies in place, but the problem is with the implementation. And number two, it is very hard for the general public to accept success of a visually impaired person or any disability for that matter. They think if you've gotten success in any way or form, you've actually cheated the system, and that is rooted in the sort of mindsets that we have right now, and that is why this is the main problem. I think the main thing that needs to be done over here is to be worked upon the mindsets, because I have a lot of individuals like Helen Keller, like Stevie Wonder, like Dawkins himself, multiple other individuals that have created or broken the norm over there in that part of the world. Here we've not created such heroes which actually like are elements of like changing the discourse that is out there. So this is like the first main issue. The second main issue is like nobody hears you out. So if you need a certain way of assistance, a certain tailored situation that you're going through, nobody will come out and help you in that
And
regard.
this is something that you've personally experienced yourself too, because I do understand that you were sitting for an examination and you were not allowed to have basically a person of your choice so as to assist you during that examination. So how would you comment on that experience?
I wanted my own writer, and I felt that if they gave me my own writer, they could do strict invigilation. Their thing was that if you get your own writer, you would cheat us. So then I brought all of these arguments that I've studied from here, from there, because their writers did not have any association to me. So they used to go drink tea, leave my exam, everything of that sort in its middle. So I think it depends. The comfort zone of the individual needs to be prioritized, and in the system there has to be certain things so they're also satisfied.
Right.
So you
so
don't
basically
cheat.
that balance between fairness and transparency of the entire examination process, both from the end of the person who is giving the exam as well as of course from the examiner's viewpoint, that needs to be balanced out. Madam, coming towards you, I think he's raised some very valid points, and since you have that domain of working in special education for such a long time, I would want you to add to this further. So when we do talk about perhaps improving our teacher training, because I do understand that then again you have been very actively involved in such programs, where do you feel does the problem lie? Yes, we can equip them with the requisite skills and knowledge so as to better teach differently abled students, but do you not feel that this all comes more with a social dilemma where perhaps teachers, educators, they need to have that basic sense of empathy towards differently abled individuals?
Before answering this question, I would like to suggest one solution that is now available in different universities. You can offer an audio recording to a person who's preparing for an exam, appearing for an exam, because once he or she gets used to that audio recorded system, no need for a writer. This is one option that can also be provided to students who feel that they have been discriminated or they are not being provided writers of their choice. Number one. Now let's come to the preparation of teachers. We have two types of teachers here. Internationally, we have one education system, and under that every type of student is served. We have two different departments. One is special education department, and then there is school education department. So the pre-service training is different for both. The special education teachers are well aware of the special needs, they are well aware of the human diversity, and they are equipped with the teaching methodologies that are there for students with special needs. But then there are mainstream teachers. The pre-service training is majorly on the subject teaching and the teaching methodology and pedagogy, but diversity definitely is there in the part, it is a part of the curricula. But basic difference is that when it is taught the school education teachers or regular school teachers are teaching those pre-service teachers. Rather, we should have specialists coming from different departments teaching those future teachers, so they can actually get a better picture of that diversity.
And also, madam, here it would also be very important then to define the level of disability and the kind of disability. Now we might come across individuals who might be on a certain end of the autism spectrum, who might appear to be very normal in their behavior and everything, but they might have a disability, medically speaking. And similarly, we might also come across individuals who might have an intellectual kind of a disability. So are Pakistani teachers, largely speaking, trained to cater to such eventualities too?
Actually, first of all, I am very positive about teachers, because since 2009 I've been training regular school teachers, and teachers are basically positive people, but they have fear of this unknown factor or unknown idea of inclusion, but because they don't have any clear idea of diversity. But yes, you are right. The neurodiversity is the most difficult group to cater in regular school right now.
I would have thought so.
You have to give them proper training, and then you have to have a specialist. Like if there is a child with autism, even if he is highly functioning, he is very intellectual, but then again he might need sensory therapist or speech therapist for certain time.
Indeed, madam. So the way forward then is, of course, to have a multidisciplinary approach in this regard. Sana, I'll come to you, and I would want you to add to this further, more so from the perspective of the progressive law that we do have in place now, especially after 2022. This law, which is by the name of Punjab Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities Act, the basic purpose of which is to give differently able persons rights and protections which they didn't have before. So do tell us about the entire journey of getting this law passed, but because we do understand that it came after a lot of struggle, so to speak, and then of course, how would you categorize it to be an improvement in our legal system?
The journey was very long. It was a 5-year journey, and 2 of our petitions got dismissed, and this was the 3rd petition, and I think third time we were lucky. We appeared in the court of Justice Jawad Hassan of the Lahore High Court. And I think we started off by just asking for disabled access ramps and disabled toilets in all public and private offices, because that was part of the LDA regulations. We had gone in to ask for this, and we came back with the whole law. And I think the credit goes to Justice Jawad Hassan for accomplishing this monumental task. Province of 110 million people did not have a law which catered for the needs of people with disabilities. And can you imagine, I mean, it's 2024, it was 2020 then. So anyway, so basically, I mean, we worked really hard, and I think this law is very unique in the sense that all the relevant stakeholders and people with disabilities themselves were part of the lawmaking process, and everybody had a say, everybody had a right to, and people raised a lot of objections and gave a lot of suggestions. And I think I was very firm on this point that the definition of disability should include disabilities that are going to come up in the future as well.
Right.
So, you know, we didn't
it was
want
preemptive that way as well.
Yes. We didn't want to just confine it to a few, because there's a misconception when it comes to disabilities. They think that one size fits all. So I think that the law caters to all that, and you know, the very fact that it's called the empowerment of persons with disabilities, it's not about just protection and rights, it's about empowering them. It's about giving them sustainable solutions.
Sana, because you see, then again, the entire narrative, the viewpoint with which we see differently able persons, that needs to change. You just can't view them as objects of pity or as charity models. The narrative needs to be more empowering towards them. We can't ignore this very important provision which talks about giving them the right to political participation and then freedom of expression, which of course they generally otherwise also had earlier in the constitution. But then again, we do see that a very specific mention of these has been made in the law too. But Ali, coming towards you, when we do talk about this from the viewpoint of implementation, now we also understand that a few years ago, a very landmark judgment of the Supreme Court of Pakistan came, which very clearly mandated the federal as well as the provincial governments to take concrete steps so as to ensure equal participation of persons with different abilities. In this regard, it was very clearly stated that persons with different abilities, they should be included in the employment quota, and this employment quota should be 2%, and one that should be implemented across all tiers of organizations. And one thing which was extremely novel in this regard is also the fact that the terminology in the official documents, that in itself was changed. There was a stress that was then then placed by the court so as to ensure words like mentally retarded, words like physically handicapped, they should be let go of. So as a differently able person yourself, to what extent do you see this very progressive judgment being implemented in our Pakistani society today?
I think that the foundations of every change that comes in any system starts from semantics and optics. In the 17th century, when Simone de Beauvoir talked about her feminist movement, women, the double shift and triple shift model was finished. In America, the nigger word was finished. And I believe that if this semantic and optic change comes about, there will be a lot of things that will be solved. Calling somebody mentally retarded actually is a form of demeaning them, and also, not only that, is a form of like showing how they're lesser human than other individuals that coexist within society. So I think that this historical lens that we have seen across the board of movements is an illustration of how these optics are not just optics. They're actual vices for change.
Right.
Secondarily, I think if you talk about policy implementation, the main thing is that the first step has been taken, and if that step is carried forward properly, then obviously the society there will be a lot of different things that will be happening, but there has to be emphasis on the policy change. There has to be some way of supervising that what the Honorable Court has ordered actually happens, because then only all of this can happen.
Right. And then again, you see these little optics that you just mentioned, they would go a long way that way too, Ali, because at a very basic level, if you're focusing on very little things like, changing the language that you use to refer to differently able persons, that in itself will also build up greater acceptability and inclusivity for differently able persons in the society. Madam, coming towards you, I do understand that you've also had that benefit of working on the national policy with regards to persons with disabilities, and then of course we also understand that in 2006 there has been a national action of plan in place too. So when it comes to bridging that gap between policy promulgation, policy formulation and practical implementation, what are the issues that we do need to practically work at? Yes, we do understand that policies do get passed, but then again the problem always arises when it comes to their respective implementation. What do you propose is the way forward?
Well, I would like to commend the team that actually developed that policy, and I think it was headed by Justice Samir Raza, and he was working with an NGO at that time, and he was very well aware that what type of initiatives will be required in future, because it was really heartening to see in 2002 inclusive education was mentioned, and then there was community-based rehabilitation, there was public-private partnership, there was physical infrastructure, there was technology, there was awareness, there was advocacy. All these aspects were addressed, and then these were elaborated in the action plan that came in 2006, and most of the goals were set for 2025. But then in 2010 the 18th amendment was passed, and then many responsibilities were shifted towards the provinces. So the implementation is, yes, very slow. In some areas it is better, but again sometimes we just feel that we are reinventing the wheel again and again, because it was mentioned there that we should use ICF based on functionality. The disabilities should be diagnosed, screening should be done, collaboration should be there, but the major issue now is that different departments have to actually play their role in implementation.
So basically, all in all, then to sum it up, we not only need to improve our stakeholder engagement in this way, but we also need to equally ensure that projects like these, programs like these, they are given their due space when it comes to budgets per se. On which I'll come to you, Sana, I would want you to add to this further. So talking about making the workplace more inclusive, because I do understand that this is that one area on which you are working. When we do talk about proceeding in this area, do you not feel here that when it comes to sustainability of differently able persons and their employment, what are the issues that we need to tackle? Yes, we do understand that job fairs are happening and you've been a very active participant of the same as well, but when it comes to ensuring that long-term sustainability in the workplace, what are the issues that we do need to address at an organizational level?
I think a job quota was very, very important for us to add in the law. And like you just said, the quota was for 2%. Now we raised it for 3%. It's the minimum quota that every office, every public and private sector needs to employ 3% people with disabilities, but that's just the minimum. It's not the, they can add on more. And then there were incentives for people who do follow the quota, and obviously fines and penalties for those who won't follow. So employment for us was something that we all need, because I think when a person becomes, financially independent, they add value to their life, and they add value to their family's life, and they contribute to the betterment of the country. So when individuals would realize that this person, even in spite of their disability, can get a job, can contribute back, is financially independent, I think that adds value to their life, and it sort of makes them realize that, okay, so they are not less than anybody.
Right. And
so
in this regard, we've also seen initiatives taken by various organizations so as to promote differently able persons as entrepreneurs. And recently I was reading this news clipping, just very recently, a few weeks ago, we just saw we've had Karachi's first cafe, which is being run by differently able persons too, and that was itself inaugurated by the Chief Minister Murad Ali Shah Saab. So that in itself is something so promising, that is so heartening, that little by little we are all getting there.
See, and it's so heartening, and it shows people that it can be done if you want to get it done. So recently I participated in a job fair. I work with an organization that is very conscious of employing people with disabilities and women and people from marginalized backgrounds. And people are taking, the law has not been implemented yet, but these are organizations who believe in social responsibility, who believes in giving back. So the work is being done, and I'm very, very hopeful that even without the power of the law behind them, they're taking initiatives on their own.
Right.
So once this law is in place, and once we have all the implementation mechanism in place, I am very hopeful that we are going to take it forward. And obviously providing employment opportunities in itself is a sustainable solution, because it's going to empower persons with disabilities, like I said before, to live a life of their own choosing, of their independence, of free choices.
Right, Sana, your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, madam, and moving towards the end of the show. So overall, when it comes to wrapping up today's discussion here, something that we must shed light upon is the fact that we do need to work upon rehabilitation of differently able persons. In this regard, I would want to quote SDG 3 particularly, which is all about ensuring healthy lives and promoting overall well-being of everybody at all ages. So when it comes to having the requisite rehabilitative interventions, that too keeping in mind the nuances of our Pakistani society, how particularly do you feel can we work towards that? And here I'm just not talking about this from a health perspective, I'm also aiming to include the education sector, the employment sector, and generally independence of differently able persons.
Well, I think most important thing is involving the family, because when the child is even in a school, the 82% of waking time he's spending with the family. So you just have to empower the family, and you have to realize that reality is socially constructed. You cannot challenge their beliefs. You have to get to their level, and then you have to start from there. Like I met a mother, and she was of the belief that the boy that she had, he was at that time he was 4 years old, and she believed that he was possessed by an evil spirit when he was 1.5, when they were passing by a graveyard.
Right.
And interestingly, the autism has these features. The child develops some words, and then he regresses, and he loses that speech. So I was not there to challenge the belief system. I was just there to counsel her and then encourage her, okay, we'll start with the religious treatment along with the medical treatment if any required, and go to an educational institution as well.
Right.
So family empowerment is one thing, and then obviously the involvement of stakeholders, because there are CSR activities when it comes to employment. People are not hiring these differently abled people because they have fears, they have different ideas about their special needs. If you invite them to the gatherings, if you invite them to in special education institutions through their CSR activities to spend one day with these children, they will learn about their different talents. Then there will be less barrier in hiring them.
Not only that, but in addition to that, we also need to have requisite awareness of the various programs and initiatives that are there so as to not only protect but also to empower differently able persons. Ali, I'll come to you, and before we conclude today's show here, it's also very important to highlight achievements of people like Haider Ali, who has of course made us all proud with regards to his impressive achievements in the 5th Paralympic Games, and then so many medals which have otherwise been won by persons with different abilities, children at international Special Olympic events. How do you as a a differently abled person then suggest can we go about nurturing the talent of such individuals? Because then again, we do need to have a long-term sustainable policy in this regard too.
Number one, I think grassroots development needs to take place. Like any other sport, there has to be certain enclosures that have to be created in smaller cities, towns, where these people can come and play sport. Not only will this make them more independent, but will also make Pakistan better at playing out these sports. Number two, there has to be more awareness about what they've achieved. So do you know about the blind cricket team, that they have won the most amount of World Cups? How many people know Haider Ali? I'm not taking away anything from Arshad Nadeem or from other people that have achieved a lot in mainstream activities, but the amount of exposure that they get, the amount of on-screen time that these things get for TRPs and everything of that sort, these individuals should be a part of that as well, and their glorification is also very important for an overarchingly important narrative to be created. And lastly, talk about vesting responsibility. I think this responsibility should be given to individuals that care about these people, or in the best way should be given to individuals that are a part of these individuals as well. So if they're a part, then they will be able to realize and also connect with individuals of this nature.
Right, Ali, and also of course in this regard the responsibility should be equally vested upon schools and educational institutions too, because they at a very basic level also need to understand and appreciate the importance of holistic character and personality development of differently abled individuals too, so that they focus upon their sports and of course prioritize that too. I'll come to you, Sanain, before we conclude today's show. So all in all, wrapping up today's conversation, what do you feel are the biggest achievements of the Pakistani government when it comes to not only empowering but also uplifting persons with different abilities? Because I do know that you have been working with the government in several capacities.
We all like to criticize the government and criticize the state that they are not doing enough, but we don't never take accountability for our own actions. If somebody parks a car in front of a disabled parking space, it's not the state's fault. It is us as individuals who have parked that car and blocked that space. Similarly, there's a lot that the government is doing, and there's a lot to be done. Of course, obviously it's not being enough, but there are several initiatives that they have started. And one of the first things when the new government came, and one of the first directives the CM issued, and I was so happy about that, was that she immediately passed a directive that all government offices need to be accessible. There needs to be a ramp and a disabled toilet in every public space. And I've been part of those meetings, and it was not just lip service. We sat down with each and every department of the province. They were like 40, more than 40, and they were all answerable and they were all held accountable that why haven't they made any progress, and a lot of them had. And over there we taught them the concept of universal design, and I was very happy to know that a lot of them they had no qualms in accepting the fact that they had no idea about it. And they were like, oh, we have learned so much today, we had no idea. So we just made a toilet for the sake of making a toilet, but now we know better. So there is a lot that is being done, like there's this Himmat Card project and several other initiatives of providing assistive technology to deserving people and hearing that, because an assistive device just changes the life of a person with a disability. And there are a lot of international there's partnerships going on which the government is working on, especially for providing assistive technologies. So there's a lot that is being done. There's a lot that isn't as well. So, but we need to be patient, we need to be positive, we need to all chip in as well.
And we also need to change our own societal mindset to start off with. You see, there's only so much that the government and the state can do at the end of the day. It also goes back to changing our very basic societal mindset, which unfortunately still construes persons with disabilities as perhaps objects of pity. We need to get past that, and it's high time that we just do that. On that note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, madam. Thank you so much, Ali. And thank you so much, Ms. Sana, for your time today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about the evolving status and rights of differently abled persons in Pakistan. In this regard, we not only spoke about the progressive laws and policies that we actually do have in place when it comes to empowering such individuals in the Pakistani society, something that we do need to actively work upon as a Pakistani society is to not only improve such persons' access to public spaces, but also, of course, to ensure that they get equal opportunities, whether this is with regards to their education or whether this is with regards to their employment per se too. In this regard, something that we do need to actively work upon is also, of course, to change that societal mindset and narrative which merely construes differently abled persons to be objects of pity as opposed to be empowered individuals in their own right. Thank you for watching The Society. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.